woke to the oppressive smell of damp straw seeping through cracked wooden walls. The cold tatami beneath your weary soles sent shivers climbing your spine, reluctant to carry the weight of a body already burdened before dawn. Your rough kimono clung moistly to your skin, heavy with the morning dew, while the pale washed-out light of early winter stretched shadows long and thin across the room. The air hung still, suffused with a silence so thick it pressed against your eardrums, a warning whispered by the bones of the house itself. Today was like all the days before, yet every movement carried a silent threat, every breath measured with a cautious rhythm. The deadly tea ceremony awaited your touch. Outside, the village lay beneath a veil of mist, cool and lethargic, as you felt the trembling in your hand, so faint, almost imperceptible. You reminded yourself it was not just exhaustion. It was fear, or perhaps a dull resignation gnawing beneath your calm facade. The wooden tea utensils, worn by years of ritual, felt cold and unforgiving as you lifted them slowly, polishing their surfaces in a slow, deliberate dance. The crackle of the charcoal stove punctuated the quiet, steady as a heartbeat, blending with the distant sighing of wind threading through the daimyo's corridors. Your sweat traced icy rivulets down your neck as each brush and turn became a question answered only by silence. You glanced around the dim room, the faded blue of dawn bleeding cautiously through the paper shoji, casting an eerie glow over the spattered stains on the wooden floorboards. The faint, acrid scent of old smoke mingled with the earthy musk of tatami mats worn thin by untold footsteps. In this hush, you noticed the almost ritualistic repetition of your motions, the slow circling of your palm over the chawan's cool surface, the measured pouring of water, the tiny wisps of steam curling upwards, as fragile as the breath between life and death. If modern life means losing your phone battery and spiraling into panic, imagine your world shrinking to that one last ember of charcoal hissing into silence, and the knowledge that one wrong move might turn your daily tea into a fatal slip. Your routine propelled you forward, a mechanical grace honed by necessity. You moved towards the hearth, each step deliberate, the coarse weave of your kimono scratching faintly against your skin, the small comfort of shared warmth around the village. Fire flickered briefly in your mind, a soft glow amid relentless cold. Yet even that spark was fragile, swallowed quickly by the creeping dread that clung invisible as mist. Suddenly, the dog's usual chorus ceased. The air thickened. From the corner of your eye, a shadow shifted slightly. More than chance, a subtle glance exchanged between two figures across the yard. The world held its breath, waiting, and you did too, caught in the stillness before what might come next. Hey, before Morpheus grabs you completely, do a quick check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button disappeared, and I don't want you to miss the next sleepy stories. While you're at it, leave a like soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little calm corner alive. Thanks for being part of it. You held your breath as the shadow lingered, a slow breath stretching taut inside the suspended silence. The chill of the dawn seeped deeper into your bones, and the faint click of footsteps from the far end of the yard became clearer, measured, deliberate, hesitant. You felt your heartbeat narrowing and expanding, a tide rushing against fragile shores, yet you remained still, a silent stone, merged with the frost-bitten earth beneath the paper-thin walls. Your fingers brushed over the worn edges of the tea whisk resting beside the chawan. The fine bamboo felt brittle, its surface polished smooth by years of careful hands. You curled your palm gently around it, drawing a slowness into your movement, as if your very survival depended on each deliberate gesture. The faint rasp of the whisk bristles against the ceramic bowl whispered secrets only you could hear. The ritual, chasing away the growing anxiety like a faint heat in the bone-deep cold. Outside, the mist thickened, a ghostly shawl veiling the village in muted colors. You could almost see the breath rising in silent columns from the earth, joining the gray whirls drifting between leafless trees and crooked fences. Your eyes traced the delicate webbing of frost sticking to the edges of the wooden shoji. Every morning brought this fragile beauty, a transient painting of ice and light that would vanish once the sun climbed higher. If it ever dared today. You rose, feeling the rough weave of your kimono pull softly, its damp weight clinging to your shifting form. Each movement sparked sensations long buried beneath, the grinding tension of living on the edge, in the narrow margins between life and something colder, more lasting. The bitter tang of smoke from the hearth mingled with the scent of wet earth, pressing into your nose like a quiet reminder of the dangers lurking beyond the walls. Your feet found the worn tatami carefully. Each step made a faint sound as the fibers whispered under your soles, a rhythm both reassuring and desperate. You could not afford to stumble. Not here. You slipped towards the low table, where the charcoal smoldered beneath a blackened kettle. Its dull embers glowed faintly, a trembling heartbeat pulsing in the near darkness, fragile as the trust you placed in this ancient dance of fire and water. Your hands moved like a slow tide, dipping the ladle deep to gather the heated water, then lifting it over the chawan's curved lip. You poured inch by inch, watching the tiny steam rise in delicate plumes, each wisp a fragile thread connecting you to a moment that demanded your full presence. You savored the sharp fragrance of the tea leaves unfurling, the way their dry crispness softened as hot water woke them to life. Around you, the house seemed to hold its breath along with you. Floorboards creaked faintly, as if sharing your cautious watchfulness. Not a sound dared break the fragile stillness, except the distant bark of a solitary dog, a sharp reminder of the wilderness pressing ever closer outside the fragile boundary of your home. You imagined the cold fingers of fog creeping nearer, seeking any gap or weakness to slip through. You bent closer to the bowl, inhaling the faint smokiness, the bitter earthiness, the subtle sweetness hidden beneath the rough texture of the leaves. The tea's bowl was cool against your skin as you lifted it gently, the weight solid and certain, an anchor in the swirling uncertainty. You sipped slowly, the warm liquid spreading its calm through your chest, dilating and softening the rigid lines of your anxiety, if only for a moment. Your gaze drifted to the window, the vague shapes of distant rooftops blurred behind the veil of mist, like memories fading before they could be grasped. A single crow cawed, its voice fractured and raw in the empty air. You listened, feeling the sound wrap around you, carrying a solemn warning hidden beneath its sharp timbre. You shivered despite the warmth of the tea, as if the very air carried a secret none dared speak aloud. The charcoal flickered, sending brief sparks of amber light dancing over the low ceiling beams. Shadows lengthened and bent, twisting into shifting shapes that teased the corners of your vision. You closed your eyes briefly, willing calm to settle in the turbulent wake of your thoughts. The silence pressed inward again, denser now, as if waiting for something unseen to pass through the thin veil between moments. The faint creak behind you caused your muscles to stiffen. You turned slowly, senses stretched, taut. The door, once firmly shut, now hung slightly ajar, just enough to let a breath of cold air slip inside. Frozen tendrils of mist curled into the room, entangling with the faint aroma of incense, lingering from previous ceremonies. The gap widened imperceptibly, and with it, the unspoken threat deepened, a quiet invitation to a danger patiently waiting. You step forward cautiously, your feet barely making sound against the floorboards. The texture of the tatami beneath your toes reassured you, its familiar softness, a lifeline holding your resolve steady. Your hand reached instinctively for the doorframe, feeling the rough grain of the wood, cold and solid, grounding you in the moment. The dim light caught the faint scratches along its edge, markings left by a restless past. You traced them slowly, as if trying to read a message written in silence. The world held its breath again, the fragile boundary between safety and peril, wavering like a candle flame in a draught. Outside the door, a shadow shifted, deliberate and hesitant, a silhouette at the edge of perception. You sensed it rather than saw it, a presence. Fretted with caution, waiting alongside you in the unyielding quiet. Your heart beat in measured pulses. The tea still warmed your hands, the faint echo of ritual steadying your nerves. And then, just as your fingers grazed the cold edge of the threshold, a whisper of movement, so slight, so nuanced, that you knew the next moment would change everything. In that suspended breath between what was and what could be, the door creaked open wider, revealing a sliver of darkness deeper than the first light of day. You held your breath as the door creaked open wider, revealing a sliver of darkness deeper than the first light of day. The chill that seeped through the opening wrapped itself around your limbs, a cold finger tracing the length of your spine, coaxing every muscle into tense stillness. The faint scent of damp wood and old smoke drifted inward, mingling with the sharp, lingering perfume of winter's breath. Outside, the mist pressed close like a living thing, swallowing shapes and sounds without mercy. Your hand remained on the doorframe, skin prickling as the rough grain pressed firmly beneath your fingertips. Each tiny groove and splinter held memories, silent narratives of long-forgotten steps and whispered fears. You inched forward, slow as the drifting fog. The soft sway of your body, a counterpoint to the invisible threat, held just beyond the threshold. The dim light from inside the room pooled at your feet, tenuous as a candle struggling against an encroaching shadow. You peered into the gloom, eyes adjusting to the stubborn gray that smothered the first rays of dawn. Shapes melded into one another. The twisted bark of an old tree, a fence half buried in fallen leaves, and beyond, the faint outline of a figure standing just at the edge of sight. The silhouette was still, measuring the air like you were, poised on the razor's edge between caution and necessity. The quiet was so dense now, it weighed heavily in your chest, each breath a fragile offering to the stillness. Behind you, the warmth of the tea vessel still lingered, a reminder of the fragile ritual that tethered you to some semblance of control. Your fingers brushed the edge of the chawan absent-mindedly, seeking the calm solidity of familiar porcelain. The smooth curve felt reassuring beneath your palm, a quiet anchor against the unpredictable tides of the outside world. The faint crackling of the charcoal stove hummed steadily, a heartbeat amid the frozen landscape of your thoughts. You exhaled very slowly, a thin thread of air that fluttered in the cold hush. Your eyes flicked downward, noting the faint frost glossing the edges of the wooden floorboards. The coolness seeped through the worn tatami beneath your bare feet, balancing the warmth still clinging to your body. Every inch of your skin felt alive to the quiet tensions around you. The faint creak of shifting timber, the subtle rustle of breath on the wind, the soft tap of a distant branch brushing against the house. The shadow beyond the door moved, just a fraction, a slow, deliberate step that stirred the mist at its edges. A shiver of awareness rippled through you. The silence was no longer hollow, but pregnant with the threat of discovery, the impossible task, weighing heavy. To remain unseen, unheard, untouched, in a world that seemed to lean ever closer. You retreated gently, finger tracing back along the doorframe. memorizing its cold solidity, the way it welcomed and barred in equal measure. Each careful step inward sharpened your senses. The delicate sounds of your own movements suddenly magnified in the hollow space. The worn fibers of tatami sighed beneath your feet, a soft, yielding reminder that beneath the looming darkness was something steady, something enduring. Your gaze locked again on the low table where the embers whispered their fading warmth. A fragile glow that flickered and danced in rhythm with your own turbulent breath. For a brief moment, you allowed yourself to feel the tentative pulse of life within those quiet flames, a spark of hope swaddled in shadow, the faint aroma of scorched wood and iron filled that small space, grounding you like a whispered prayer against the vast, indifferent cold, stretching beyond the thin walls. You moved toward the hearth again, each action slow, deliberate, a choreography born not of choice, but necessity. The texture of your kimono brushed soft against your arms, the weight of dampness settling like a second skin, pressing the chill deeper still. Your hand closed around the bamboo whisk once more, its brittle whispers scratching against the ceramic bowl as you resumed the slow, cyclical ritual. The steam rose in delicate spirals, dissipating quietly into the cold morning, fragile as a secret held too close to the heart. Outside, the village remained cloaked in mist, the shapes of houses and bare trees swallowed whole, their outlines shimmering uncertainly between presence and absence. The distant cry of a crow shattered the silence, a raw, ragged sound that seemed to pause time itself. You centered yourself on the warmth spreading through your fingers, the steady rhythm of your heartbeat syncing with the charcoal's muted glow. Then, a movement, brief, sharp, yet masked in the relentless gray. At the edge of your vision, a flicker of something unnatural, a glimmer of metal catching the pale light as a blade flicked silently from its sheath, the briefest glint against the somber dawn. Your breath caught, every nerve alert yet frozen in place. The thin veil between the safety of the room and the hostile unknown outside trembled like a fragile web spun with tension. Your gaze darted to the doorway, that narrow slit of shadow now framing a promise of something more dangerous than silence. And just as the room's warmth seemed to dissolve, the distant echo of soft footsteps began anew, careful and measured, coming closer. The bamboo whisk paused midair, trembling gently between your fingers, a quiet herald of what was to come. You remained motionless, the fragile thread of warmth from the tea still lingering in your veins, a subtle defiance against the creeping cold that slipped past the door's widening gap. The chill curled around you like a slow-moving fog, pressing lightly against your skin beneath the thin layers of damp fabric, drawing your senses taut. Every breath you drew felt simultaneously precious and perilous. The rhythm measured more by silent necessity than by natural cadence. The shadow beyond the threshold shifted again, a soft step that barely disturbed the thick fog, as if the world itself conspired to hide its passage. You felt the faint brush of time scraping against the edges of your awareness, the suspended moment where stillness and movement blur. The scent of smoke deepened, mingling with the wet earth beyond. The sharp bite of winter's breath curling into your lungs, steadying your pulse with icy clarity. You lowered your hand slowly, careful not to break the delicate balance that held you suspended between presence and absence. Your palm pressed briefly against the doorframe's worn wood, tracing its cold resilience like an old friend's steady gaze. The tiny splinters beneath your fingers whispered history, ghosts of hurried footsteps, whispered warnings etched into the grain. The door no longer felt like a barrier, but a fragile boundary between here and the unknown, your world and all that threatened to unravel it. The steady tick of your own heart filled the room, syncing with the faint snap of charcoal embers, each whispering their fragile promise of continuation. The tea bowl rested heavy and cold in your other hand, a silent anchor. You lifted it just slightly, the porcelain's smooth curve grounding you in the ritual that tethered you, a rhythm in the chaos. The steam curled upwards in slow, hesitant tendrils, dissolving invisibly into the chill air. Outside, the mist thickened, swallowing shapes by degrees, until the outlines of rooftops and bare trees blurred into ghostly forms. You caught the distant cry of a crow, rough and ragged, cutting through the muted morning. The sound clung to the silence, a solitary voice marking the boundary between the safety behind the walls and the cold unknown. Beyond, your gaze drifted back to the door. The faintest gleam flickered in the shadow just out of reach, a sharp glint of metal, catching the fragile light like a silent stiletto. The movement was too subtle to be certain, a glimmer almost swallowed by the gray. Yet your senses told you it was there, poised and deliberate, a presence braced against the unforgiving cold. Your breath caught in a steady, shallow catch. The coldness traveled like a silent river down your spine, pooling deep within your bones. You inhaled slowly, letting the bitter scent of scorched wood and old smoke fill your senses. The delicate crunch of frost under your bare feet whispered beneath the tatami, a fragile layer cushioning your careful movements. The coarse fabric of your kimono shifted softly, dragging wet against your ankles, a subtle reminder of vulnerability. The shadow moved once more, a deliberate step, slow and measured. The muffled scrape of fabric, faint and uncertain, barely distinct against the chorus of morning wind threading through the trees. Your fingers tightened unconsciously on the bamboo whisk, the brittle surface rough beneath your palm as you felt the rhythm of years guiding your trembling hand. You took another breath, steadying your resolve around the ritual that pulsed like a heartbeat in the quiet. The slow, deliberate pouring of water over the tea leaves felt like a defiance of the creeping dread, a subtle claim of control in a world growing fragile at the edges. Each drop fell with the weight of gravity, a soft drip, barely louder than your own breath, dissolving into steam that rose and twirled invisibly. The room held its fragile balance on the cusp of revelation. The faint creak of floorboards echoed softly, an ancient groan from the past melding with the present silence. The mist outside swirled with renewed urgency, teasing the shadows into tentative motion. Somewhere distant, a second dog barked briefly, sharp and anxious, a reminder of the life that stirred beyond your fragile refuge. Your heartbeat pulsed in your throat, slow and deliberate, as you felt the grip of something unspoken tighten. The door, still ajar, whispered its loosened invitation to the unknown. A faint draft slipped through the crack, carrying with it an intangible weight, a silent promise woven of frost and shadow. You lowered the chawan to the table with measured care, the soft thunk, a subtle punctuation in the morning stillness. Fingers lingering on the smooth interior. You held the echo of warmth close, a quiet shield against the intangible threat. The ritual continued, a fragile thread strung tight across the widening fissures of the day. Suddenly, an unsteady shift in the shadow near the door caught your eye. A pause, weighted with intention. You sensed the figure poised within the fog, the tension like a taut wire ready to sing its quiet warning. The dim outline seemed to reach forward, a slow motion spoken in silence. And then a soft sound, the faintest brush of fabric against wood, a hesitant, scraping step that slipped beneath the brittle veil of chill. The door's edge wavered in the muted light, flickering with the breath of the unknown. The moment stretched and thinned, fragile as spun glass, and then snapped, a whisper of movement just beyond the threshold, a breath, drawn sharp in the cold dawn. Your gaze locked once more on the narrowing gap between certainty and shadow. And as you steadied your breath, you caught sight of something dark and deliberate. A hand poised just beyond the doorway, fingers curling slowly around the doorframe, seeking a quiet entry into the fragile light of day. The hand curled around the doorframe, tightened, pressure radiating along your fingertips. Slow, measured. The night's chills seeped deeper now, climbing like fingers tracing the bare nape of your neck, coaxing a taut stillness into your limbs. You held yourself motionless, the faint heat from the tea retreating into the distant past, leaving only the cold and the shadow. The flicker of early dawn fought through the mist, muted light washing over the worn wooden boards beneath your feet, dusted with frost, like a quiet invitation to remember the seasons turning. Breath billowed softly from your lips, a fragile cloud dissolving against the stale, damp air. Somewhere beyond the widening door, the faint scrape of fabric whispered, a slow, hesitant sound that paused and resumed, like the uncertain tapping of raindrops on a bare window. You exhaled slowly, fingers tracing the splintered wood, each groove catching a sliver of pale light, like buried secrets, begging to be unearthed. The weight of the unknown pressed in, yet you found a rhythm in the ritual, a melody woven between the cracks of fear and the brittle certainty of the charcoal's dying glow. Your other hand cradled the chawan, porcelain cool against your skin, a familiar curve grounding you amid the spiraling tension. Outside, a breath of wind stirred the mist, sending tendrils, weaving through the bare branches above the fence. You imagine the world wrapped in a gauze of silence, fragile as the frost brittle beneath your soles, every sound muffled, but amplified by the weight of waiting. The distant crow's harsh cry sliced through the veil, a jagged note of ominous clarity ringing in the stillness. Your gaze flicked back to the doorway, where shadow and light tangled in a slow, unyielding dance. The silhouette there shifted imperceptibly, a charcoal stroke on a canvas of gray. Eyes trained to catch the faintest movement traced the edge of a hand, pulling just slightly, nudging the space wider, seeking passage. Your breath halted, the space between heartbeats stretching impossibly long, a taut wire vibrating with tension. The ritual that had anchored you moments before now felt fragile, like a single thread threatening to snap. The bamboo whisk in your grasp twitched, brittle and delicate, as though echoing the silent quiver threading through your very being. You leaned forward, just enough to feel the cold seep into your bones, the biting kiss of winter pressed close by the half-open door. The scent of wet earth mingled with old smoke, a pungent reminder of the night's lingering secrets and the life stubbornly clinging to old rhythms. Each inhalation was a slow journey through shadows and memories, tethered still to the warmth cocooned inside the ritual. The door creaked, a quiet protest, its hinges reluctant, yet yielding. The gap widened imperceptibly, a slow invitation fraught with whispered dangers, folded tight inside the chill. You pressed your palm flat against the aging wood, rough and splintered, savoring the gritty texture, like a touchstone in the labyrinth of uncertainty. The faintest sound, a step so soft it could have been the wind rearranging fallen leaves, echoed from the yard, a tentative beat measured against your racing pulse. You listened, shrouded in the suspended silence that stretched thin between the moments. The whispers of shifting timber melded with the distant murmur of the village waking beneath its veil of fog. Lowering the chawan with deliberate care, you let warmth ebb, the soft clink against the low table, punctuating the breathless scene. Fingertips traced the rim, eyes never straying far from the shifting shadows bleeding from the opening. The fragile trail of steam from fresh tea rose and dissolved into the cold air, a fleeting bridge between stillness and the gathering storm beyond. Steps approached again, hesitant, like the careful pacing of a predator mindful of fragile prey. A faint glimmer caught your eye, metal flashing in a sliver of dawn, not steel raised in attack, but the cold promise of an unseen blade, poised and deliberate. The cruel gleam stitched a line of tension through the mist, a sharp contrast to the soft glow cradling your hands. Your breath tightened around a silent prayer, muscles coiled in the hold just before a tide breaks. The fabric of your kimono clung damply against your skin, a second layer of vulnerability wrapped in the ritual's fragile armor. Outside, the mist thickened, swallowing shapes whole, swallowing certainty alongside it. Then, the slow, almost inaudible sound of fabric brushing against wood. A scrape, like the edge of fear, nerving itself forward. The door shifted again, a subtle creak breaking the stillness, spilling tendrils of shadow into your sanctuary. You felt it then, the shift from waiting to possibility. The fragile veil torn away, just a fraction. Your fingers gripped the doorframe tighter as a shadow slipped quietly across the threshold. The faint outline of a figure materialized, its breath shallow clouds mingling with the mist. The dim light caught flecks of cold steel nestled at the figure's side, the promise of intent coiled beneath deliberate calm. Time dilated, stretched thin as frost upon glass. Hesitation hung heavy in the air, a silence pregnant with question and unspoken danger. The warmth in your chest flickered, faint but stubborn, as you steeled yourself, breath slow and steady, tracing the rhythm carved by the ritual you barely trusted to keep you whole. Eyes holding the delicate darkness beyond, you sense the movement, the slow advance into your world, a kind of reaching forward, fingers curling softly until they brushed the chilled wood beside yours. The fragile boundary thinned, the moment poised on the knife edge between sanctuary and surrender. Then the faintest noise, a whisper of fabric, the shifting of weight, the settling creak of the threshold, signaled what was to come. The past and the present tumbled together, fragile and unyielding, as you stared into the gathering shadows, feeling the breath of the unknown fold around you like a slow, inevitable fall. And as the first foot crossed the doorway, you felt the fragile warmth of your tea slip away, replaced by the cold certainty that everything was about to change. The shadow's fingers lingered briefly on the doorframe, pressing faintly into the grain of ancient wood worn smooth by time and silent secrets. You held still, your breath a slow tide, washing over the fragile edge of night. The cold seeped deeper now, threading through your damp kimono, crawling beneath skin taut with anticipation. Frost clung like whispered breath to the edges of the floorboards, the faintest crunch beneath your shuffling soles, mirroring the steady, cautious beat in your chest. Your eyes traced the faint outline of the figure beyond. Still, deliberate, the mist curled and curled again around the silhouette, folding it into the gray like smoke dissolving into air. You sensed the careful weight of the moment, the suspended quiet before something shifted irrevocably. Your hand released the doorframe just so, fingers brushing wood warm from years beneath palms accustomed to ritual and restraint. Inside, the faint glow of charcoal embers pulsed steadily, a heartbeat, coaxing warmth from there. Cold shadows. Steam rose in spirals delicate and slow from the chawan cradled in your other hand, curling through the air like a soft sigh. The bitter scent of tea leaves unfolded, sharp and earthy, a quiet anchor tethering you to a rhythm older than fear. Outside, the world seemed paused on a blade's edge. Your gaze flicked to the distant trees, their skeletal branches weaving fragile filigree against the heavy sky. The village lay shrouded in mist, a blurred memory, etched in muted grays and silvers. Somewhere a crow's lonely caw cracked the silence, ragged and raw, an echo pulsing through the frosted air. You moved with care, the coarse fabric of your kimono whispering soft against your skin as you stepped back from the threshold. The faint thud of your footfall on cold tatami was swallowed quickly by the thick hush. Your fingers tightened around the bamboo whisk, its brittle bristles scratching gently against the porcelain bowl as you resumed the slow, reverent turning. Each motion was a thread weaving the fragile tapestry of ritual, a defiant claim against the creeping chill of unknown forces, pressing just beyond your sanctuary. The water pooled and swirled, warm, steady, over dry leaves curling like ancient scrolls being slowly unrolled. Steam danced upward in slow, hesitant tendrils, fracturing the gray stillness with whispers of warmth. From the corner of your vision, the shadow shifted again, subtle and patient, like a question posed in silence. Your pulse hushed beneath the frozen air. A tremor held beneath the calm surface. The door creaked a breath, a sound fragile as a spider's thread, and you felt time fold inward around. That moment, a narrowing of the world to what was at your fingertips. Your gaze returned to the bowl. The smooth curve, heavy and solid in your palm, offered a measure of control in a space fracturing around you. Steam curled like smoke from an extinguished flame, thin and fleeting, drawing away before it could clear the air of its concealed dangers. Beyond, breath plumed white in the stillness. A visible ghost exhaled in secrecy. The edge of the door trembled, A sliver of shadow, pulling like a slow sigh, widening imperceptibly. A door inching toward inevitability. You smelled the damp musk of earth after frost, felt the tightening coil of unseen tension winding through the cold. A faint scrape whispered against wood. Soft fabric sliding across the threshold, deliberate yet cautious. Your fingertips found the rough grain of the doorframe once more, the texture grounding you as the gap yawned wider, inviting. The chill pressed past the worn barrier in delicate waves, wrapping like smoke around your skin, a ghost unfurling unseen fingers. Your breath caught, warm and slow, rising in the cage of your chest. The ritual faltered briefly, the brittle brush of whisk against bowl losing steadiness, as if your very core had shifted in anticipation. The ember's dim glow flickered hesitantly, casting quivering shadows entwined with the mist spilling inward. The figure became clearer, a dark shape clothed in shadow and cold, a presence folded tightly into the sigh of dawn. Steel glinted faintly at their side, cold and bright, a promise not yet fulfilled, yet looming in silent threat. Yet within the poised stillness, no motion disturbed the fragile balance, only the breath of time stretching thin. You swallowed against a dryness creeping through your throat, the taste of cold lingering as your hands trembled slightly, cradling the teacup's weight like a talisman against growing dread. The slow pour continued, water swirling through leaves, steam drifting upward, a soft, fleeting resistance against the advancing dark. Outside, the wind rose, threading through bare branches, teasing the mist into restless movement. The distant cry of a dog echoed, not frantic, but watchful, an unseen sentinel echoing through the frosted dawn. The village beneath the veil of morning remained suspended, waiting alongside you. Your gaze snagged on the narrowing gap, the thin fracture between warmth and shadow, sanctuary and breach. The cold pressed forward in slow waves. Fingers brushed wood once again, steadying. Then the slow bend of a hand stepped fully inside, a shadow unfolding, gently where none should have dared. The air shifted, a subtle change like the first tremor of a falling leaf. Your heart drifted into a measured stillness, breath drawing taut as the space between certainty and the unknown collapsed. And there, standing just across the threshold, the figure's face appeared. Unfinished, half-hidden, a secret carved from winter's shadow. The warmth of the ritual slipped away, swallowed beneath the cold certainty that no retreat remained. The hand lingering on the doorframe tightened its grip, the rough grain pressing firmly into your skin, as if seeking to anchor itself to the fragile line between inside and out. The cold that dripped from the widening gap crawled up your spine, threading through your damp kimono like icy tendrils, delicate, relentless, and insistent. Your breath was shallow, held tight in the cage of a tightening throat, each exhale a fragile wisp that vanished quickly into the still morning air. The dimness beyond the threshold thickened, swallowing the faint wash of pale dawn light, folding the silhouette deeper into shadow. You could feel the slow pulse of heartbeats, your own, echoing in the hollow room, a soft drum beneath the rustle of wet fabric and the almost inaudible whisper of careful movement. A single leaf brushed against the wooden fence outside, the sound a brittle crack in the vast silence. Your fingers curved slightly on the door's edge, tracing the splintered wood with tentative reverence. Each groove held memories unspoken, ghosts of days when fear was less present, when life hummed a quieter, steadier tune. The warmth from the tea in your other hand still lingered faintly, a stubborn ember against the cold shadow pressing relentlessly inward. Steam rose in slow spirals, curling lazily upwards, delicate traces dissolving into the space between what you knew and what lurked just beyond sight. You blinked slowly, the weight of the morning settling heavy behind your closed lids. The scent of damp straw mixed with burnt charcoal reached you in soft waves, a smoky tapestry threading through the cold, reminding you of countless ceremonies performed with trembling hands. But today, the ritual clung differently, woven with tension, threaded with a sharp edge of uncertainty. A breath stirred beyond the door, slow and deliberate, unraveling like the soft exhale of a spirit reluctant to be seen. You felt the faint brush of fabric, the hesitant scrape of cloth against wooden boards. Then stillness returned, thick and unyielding. Your heart caught in the silence, balanced precariously on the cusp of revelation. The room seemed suspended between moments, the ancient timbers holding their breath with you. Slowly, you moved inward, the tatami beneath your feet whispering with every careful step, a fragile carpet cushioning the weight of fear and determination. Your hand reached once more for the bamboo whisk, its brittle rods cool beneath your palm, polished smooth by the hours and years of ritual. The touch grounded you, a familiar rhythm in the shifting uncertainty. Water sloshed gently in the kettle, its dull hum was like a muted heartbeat. You lifted the ladle carefully, dipping it into the warm liquid, the surface rippling softly under the motion. Pouring the water inch by cautious inch, you watched the pale tendrils of steam spiral upwards, a fragile dance of warmth in the cold air. The scent of tea leaves awakened slowly, earth and smoke mingling in the quiet room, like a whispered prayer for calm. Outside, the mist drifted thick and heavy, darkening the world to soft grays and muted blues. Shapes melted into one another, bent branches, fallen leaves, the crooked fence, until the village seemed swallowed whole by a ghostly hand. Your eyes traced the frost, curled fine at the window edges, a brittle lace of white that glinted faintly as the light shifted. Somewhere far off, a crow's hoarse call cracked sharply, cutting through the stillness like a jagged blade. The shadow at the door did not move, held patient in the gray, a silent sentinel waiting for the unseen signal. Time flowed oddly here, the slow drip of water into the bowl, the curling steam, the subtle creak of wood reacting to a gentle breeze threading the house, your senses attuned to every nuance, ears straining against the hush for even the faintest betrayer of presence. Your hand tightened briefly on the whisk, the fragile bristles scraping the smooth ceramic as you resumed the slow circular motion. The movements linked you inexorably to something older than fear, steadier than uncertainty, an anchor in the flickering dance between light and shadow. Suddenly, a soft creak edged from the floorboards near the door. Your breath caught sharply, muscles tensing like fine wire ready to snap. The faint shift of weight and the whisper of fabric brushed against wood once again. Slower now, along a path deliberate but cautious. The darkness yawned wider, with the door slipping further, as if drawn by an unseen will, swallowing a hand and then a sleeve folded in the dim. You froze, every nerve poised, the warmth from earlier drained to a distant flicker. Outside, the cold mist pressed close, tendrils wrapping the doorway as if seeking entry into your sanctuary. The distant bark of a dog echoed somewhere beyond the veil, sharp and brief, a lonely sentinel, reminding you of the world that waited just out of reach. Your eyes found the shadow's face, half hidden in gloom, blurred and shifting, but the faint glint of steel caught the dawn's weak light, whispering promises tangled in cold intent. The silence gathered weight, thickening as the figure stepped further across the threshold, a slow unfolding in the brittle morning. Time stretched taut, breath flattened, the ritual's steady cadence hanging on the brink of collapse. You met the shadow's gaze, the unspoken question suspended between you, fragile and sharp. As the hand released the doorframe and reached deeper into the room, the chill was complete, carrying away the fragile warmth you had clung to. The quiet fracture broken, the door now hung open wider. A narrow passage into the unknown ripped through your fragile world. You stood rooted, senses stretched and raw, knowing without knowing that the next breath you took would be the beginning of a story that could never be undone. The faint glow from the charcoal embers trembled softly in the low light, casting long, wavering shadows across the worn floorboards beneath your feet. Your body stayed motionless. The ritual's fragile warmth lingered like a ghost beneath your damp kimono, pressing silently against the cold dawn creeping through the cracked wooden walls. Each breath you drew was slow and deliberate, a measured thread woven through the thick silence that wrapped the room like a shroud. Your fingers lingered on the doorframe's rough grain, tracing its splinters as if trying to decipher the silent history etched into every groove. Outside, the mist clung heavier now, swallowing shapes and light with a relentless hunger. drawing the village into a gray oblivion. The distant call of a lone crow cut sharply through the air, a harsh edge against the soft whispers of shifting frost and the faint rustling of bare branches bending under winter's weight. You shifted imperceptibly, the coarse fabric of your kimono brushing against your skin in a slow, measured motion. The damp coolness beneath the layers tugged deeper into your bones, pulling a chill that no fire yet born could fully vanquish. The scent of scorched wood and wet earth wove a tapestry of fragility, a delicate balance between what remained warm and what encroached with silent intent. Your eyes searched the shadows beyond the threshold where the door hung wide, a narrowing slit dividing sanctuary and the unknown. The figure stood barely discernible, an ink stroke blurred by the drifting fog, cold steel gleaming faintly at the side, caught and lost in the murmur of dawn's pale light. Every tiny movement became a symphony of tension. The soft scrape of fabric against wood, the steady slow shift of weight, the invisible breath mingling with the mist. Inside, the ritual called you back. The bamboo whisk, brittle and worn, trembled gently in your grasp. Each bristle grazed the smooth curve of the chawan, coaxing a cautious dance of steam. From the rising water, you poured slowly, water falling in thin, deliberate arcs over the leaves, curled deep within the bowl, each droplet a quiet testament to patience in the face of creeping dread. The bitterness of the tea unfurled tentatively, an earthy perfume that softened the sharpness clinging to your nerves. A soft creak echoed faintly near the doorway. Your breath caught. The moment stretched impossibly long as silence folded itself around the sound. The dim glow of embers pulsed rhythmically, a fragile beacon striving against the tightening grip of cold. You felt the brittle vulnerability of the moment, the fragile thread binding the safety inside to the encroaching unknown outside. Careful not to disturb the quiet balance, you took a measured step back from the door, the whisper of tatami beneath your bare feet, smoothing the sound. The rough wood pressed reassuring beneath your palm as you retreated, familiar textures anchoring you to this small pocket of light and warmth. Your senses sharpened, catching the faintest flutter of movement, a shadow reaching, fingers sliding slowly along the weathered frame, the figure's hand curled possessively, the coldness seeping deeper, a silent flame of danger flickering in the morning haze. Your heart's pulse slowed and deepened, a dark ebb beneath the gentle thrum of ritual. Steam curled upward in delicate spirals, fragile as a whispered secret, fading into the chill that crept steadily closer. Outside, the mist thickened, wrapping the world in a pale veil, softening edges and muting colors to faded grays. The sharp crack of a distant branch breaking punctuated the stillness briefly, a reminder that the night's shadows were not yet spent. That waiting was a hunger all its own, patient and unyielding. The scent of damp straw and ancient wood filled your nostrils again, bitter and sharp, beneath the delicate bloom of tea leaves. You lifted the chawan carefully, the cool porcelain solid and grounding against your fingers, as if alone it could hold back the tide of uncertainty pressing at the edges of your vision. You tilted the bowl slowly, the warm liquid soothing the tense lines coiled beneath your skin. A brief blossom of comfort amid the growing weight. Your gaze drifted once more to the narrowing divide between the light and the shade, the frail boundary peeling back layer by layer. The figure moved, deliberate, each step a careful negotiation with the fog that sought to erase its presence. You caught a glimmer, the faintest, flicker of steel, unyielding and cold, poised beneath the wavering dawn. Your breath tightened, a thin thread pulled taut beneath your ribs. The ritual's rhythm became a fragile mantra, a slow cadence to steady clattering thoughts. Pouring water, whisking leaves, inhaling the bitter scent with deliberate calm, each motion a defiance wrapped around fragile hope. A faint whimper crackled through the mist outside, a dog's distant voice, cautious and fleeting, threading a soft urgency into the frozen stillness. The village held its breath beneath the ghostly veil, suspended in a moment where shadow and light balanced with exquisite tension. The door's edge trembled again, the final barrier loosening at the invitation of unknown hands. You stepped back, your palm pressing firmly against the rough wood as if to hold the fragile line between sanctuary and surrender. The faint warmth of the tea faded, a dim ember swallowed by the vast cold creeping inward. Then the hand fully crossed the threshold, dark and deliberate, casting a long shadow that stretched like a clawed promise across the floor. The silence shattered into 1,000 fragile shards, each a sharp note of warning, wrapped in the scent of frost and whispered dread. Your breath caught, heart tightening, in the slow, inexorable fall of everything familiar falling away. In the fragile gloom, the figure's face emerged, a pale mask carved from shadow and morning mist, eyes sharp and unreadable as winter's own breath. And as the first slow step carried the intruder deeper into your world, you felt the last thread of warmth snap, unraveling into the cold certainty that the fragile calm was gone forever. The figure stepped fully into the room, and the fragile boundary between inside and outside dissolved like mist under the morning light. A faint breath escaped, mingling with the lingering steam of your tea, the warmth you clung to slipping slowly away. Yet, amid the cold and shadow, the moment held a calm you hadn't expected, a hush not of threat, but of understanding stretched taut across the silence. You met the intruder's gaze, and in that pause, years of tension folded away, replaced by a fragile truce woven in breaths and unspoken farewells. The blade at their side lowered slightly, its cold glimmer softened by the slow dawn light weaving through the paper shoji. You sensed the danger retreating, absorbed into a deeper current of necessity and shared burdens long endured. Slowly, the visitor lowered the hood that veiled their face, revealing eyes rimmed with exhaustion, a mirror to your own weariness. The haunting stillness thawed in that simple gesture, the space between you warming just enough to allow fragile words to bloom. No more shadows cast between you, only the raw, honest weight of survival. Quietly, you finished the tea ceremony, each motion deliberate, a balm to steady nerves worn thin. The final swirl of the whisk, the gentle clink of bowl on table, echoed like a soft heartbeat in the expanding calm. The chill outside no longer pressed so fiercely against the walls. Steam curled higher, weaving the warmth back into the air, a small victory against the relentless cold. Together, you stepped toward the hearth, the faint glow flickering as if waiting to stitch this quiet fragment of time into something whole. The visitor's presence filled the room, not as a threat, but as an acknowledgement of shared endurance. The long night's fears receded, replaced by a fragile hope folding quietly into the first light of day. Outside, the mist began to lift slowly, the village releasing its breath after a long, shrouded sleep. The crow's harsh cries softened into the chorus of new beginnings. Leaves shimmered faintly with dew, and the cold that had sunk so deeply ebbed ever so slightly at the edges. The earth beneath the thin frost waited patiently, holding memories of winter even as the promise of spring whispered beyond the horizon. You closed your eyes for a moment, feeling the remnants of warmth seep into your bones, steady and sure. The coarse fabric of your kimono no longer bit with chill, but settled softly. A worn skin shaped by endurance and quiet resilience. The gentle crackle from the hearth filled the space like a pulse, a reminder that some things persist even when everything feels fragile. Your guest spoke almost inaudibly, words a thread of connection in the shifting light. There was no need for hostility now, only a careful weaving of narratives once held apart by fear and silence. You listened, letting the rhythm of speech flow gently, the cadence unfolding the shared story of many dawns spent in shadow, waiting for a crack in the cold. As the sun climbed cautiously, rays poured through the slats and paper, casting soft golden patterns that danced over the worn wood floors and delicate tatami weave. Light, once foreign and fragile, now seemed to anchor itself firmly in the room, wrapping the moment. In a warm embrace of promise and peace, you and the visitor moved slowly toward the door. The once ominous threshold, now a passage bridged by fragile trust. Outside, the village breathed anew, mist peeling back like a curtain to reveal the muted colors of life, quietly persisting beneath the frost. The dogs began their tentative chorus again, a familiar chorus rising softly through silver morning air. You wrapped your fingers around the worn doorframe, feeling in the rough grain the countless hands that had held fast before your own. With a final breath, you stepped outside, each footfall a measured beat in the eternal dance between night and day, fear and hope. The cold air touched your face, not as a shiver of dread, but as a crisp invitation to continue. The village lay open before you, humble and unyielding, a world made of simple mornings and endless chances to begin again. The shadows had receded, if only for a moment, and in that fragile clearing, you found a quiet peace that trembled but did not break. As you looked back once, the room held only the faint scent of tea and smoke, a silent witness to the rituals that had carried you through. The fragile warmth now rested in your chest, steady and sure, an ember glowing softly beneath winter's shadow. With the sun ascending and darkness dissolving, the story reached its calm close. The past folded gently away, leaving space for breath, for quiet moments that settle heavy in the heart, and for sleep to come soft and sure. Tonight, the cold would not reach so far. Tonight, you would rest.